Good morning. So today I'm going to be talking about the movie Don't Come Back from the Moon, and I'm going to be talking about how I think it's a metaphor for absent fathers. So Don't Come Back from the Moon is a 2017 movie about a small town where all of the fathers slowly disappear one by one, and they leave their teenage children and their wives to kind of pick up the pieces. So this movie was actually really interesting to me because I couldn't find anything about it. I really couldn't find any information about it at all. I tried to look on Reddit to see if other people had talked about it, and I just got like people asking questions about the moon landing. And then I also tried to look on TikTok and I just found conspiracy theories about how the moon isn't real. So I really had the luxury of going into this movie completely blind, and I also had the luxury of kind of giving my own interpretation since I couldn't find anybody else talking about this movie. So first things first, visuals, my favorite. So visually, this movie is actually really interesting because it's another movie that does a good job of showing the time it was filmed. So it has a lot of imagery that reminds me of like indie music videos from the 2010s. This movie's from 2017, like I said before. The movie takes place in a small town in the desert, and it's in a poor community where you see a lot of like shots of ancient gas stations, you see sand dunes and trailer houses. I actually enjoyed this movie visually because it reminded me a lot of the town where I grew up. And you see these like worn out couches and you see these like wood paneling on the walls. And it kind of reminded me a lot of my own life. And I think from an outsider's perspective, it could kind of maybe come across as like cheap and trashy. But for someone like me who has lived that reality, it's very much home. So, one of the other things I want to talk about is that I think the initial charm of this movie is that you actually do have to think a little bit about it. Because during my initial watch, I really wasn't sure what was going on. This movie doesn't give you a clear storyline of what exactly happened to the fathers and why they disappeared. You're kind of just left up to your own imagination. Even their kids don't know. They just start saying that they went to the moon. So, upon my first initial watch, I really wasn't sure what to think. And then I kind of let the movie sit with me a little bit, and I kind of started to come up with my own conclusion, which is that this movie really talks about abandonment. It talks about children growing up without their fathers, and it also talks about breaking that sort of cycle. So, like I said before, the movie never really says what happens to these fathers. You just know that they're not there. They vanish into thin air one by one, and we're never told what happens to them. We're never told if they actually do go to the same place or not. We just see them there one minute and then they're gone the next. And this is where I think we get that theme of abandonment from. So you see these children get left behind and they don't really know what's going on, and they sort of start to come up with their own ideas. And then we see them learn and start to grow up without their fathers, and I think the movie kind of touches on the results of that. These kids really do try to do the best they can with what they have, but their problem solving is non-existent. You see them tear up old trailers for scrap to trade, you see them start drinking, and they never really talk things out with each other. They just sort of fight. And we also get a scene where our main character, Mickey, finds his friend's dad, and his dad is aware of what he's done to his son by leaving. And he has this moment of self-awareness where he says that his son is better off without him. And this was kind of interesting to me because I think this is kind of a lie that a lot of people tell themselves to make themselves feel better about not taking responsibility for their children. Honestly. And this point in the movie is kind of where it takes a turn, and we get to see what I think is the overarching theme of this movie, which is breaking the curse of all of that. So this movie ends up showing the teenagers kind of growing into men, and through that, they start to follow the same pattern that their disappearing fathers did. This movie actually shows this really clearly when Mickey gets a girl pregnant and makes the decision to run away. He tells his younger brother that he's going to go find his ex-girlfriend, and I kind of think the movie was giving us that because he's running to find her, and through her, he wants to find these simpler times and these times where he doesn't have to grow up and take responsibility for his child. So he runs away and he doesn't actually find his ex, but he thinks he sees his dad, and he starts to chase him down in his car. And for me, this scene is actually probably the most impactful of the whole movie. Because he never catches his dad. He keeps chasing him down, but he never catches him, and he only ends up driving himself further away from home. And in doing that, Mickey is becoming his father. So Mickey does, however, have this moment where he decides to turn the car around and break the cycle. And we see him go back to the town and be a father to his child. He doesn't go to the moon. He chooses to stay and be the person that he needed when he was a kid. So overall, I want to give the movie a 4 out of 10 just because I do think they could have told this story in a more linear way that wasn't necessarily so open to interpretation. I only say that just because I think this topic is important and I think they could have given us more with it. I'm also going to give the movie a 4 just because it kind of does something similar to We're All Going to the World's Fair, where it has a pretty good message, but not a lot actually happens in the movie, so it seems like it gets a little lost. I was also thinking that this is a movie that I think would have been a really interesting, oh geez, a really interesting short film. And I think maybe it would have done better that way. The movie itself isn't that long, but I think honestly, if it was an actual like short, I think maybe the message could have gotten across better with less time.